So I wanted to make a confession that I failed to do during each pasada, and I'm really not quite sure why. One of our training rules is to not complain and to pick faults and abuse others. And hopefully I'm not abusing others, but this part about not complaining, I often don't say it out loud, but I know it's running through my mind throughout the day. And there's any number of things that can set it off. Changes that I didn't expect and I don't like, things that people do I don't like, things that people say I don't like, things that I do that I don't like. It could be the temperature, it could be the weather, it could be the lighting, it could be any kind of aesthetic thing that I think is off. All of these things just give rise to griping. And often it seems like this is kind of a normal part of being alive, of thinking, of discriminating. How could I not, think that, oh, that's really not good looking, or, oh, that was really unkind, and then to go on and on about it. But there's something about it that since I've come here, I've been trying to pick up on when something verges into complaining. And I know that there are people out there who don't struggle with this as much. They just don't find so many reasons to complain. And actually, people in my family, my grandmother, my aunt, I can't remember them ever complaining about anything, which is like phenomenal. And my grandmother was a very spiritual person, and she was always practicing compassion and saying prayers. So that's probably has something to do with it. But I remember also hearing a story about there was a Tibetan monk who had just arrived in India from Tibet, and someone asked him, "Aren't you hot in your woolen robes?" And he's like, "Yeah, so what?" And I think this is a really great illustration of equanimity. He didn't suppress the fact that he was hot, and he was probably also uncomfortable, because who wouldn't be? But he also didn't think it was worth giving his time and attention to. And he went on to say something like, "Yeah, but later I won't be so hot, and then I'll be cold." So I think that, yeah, that really captures complaining is not inevitable, it's not necessary, it's not helpful. So yes, recognizing that this is a choice has been helpful in cutting down that habit. Recognizing how much suffering it causes, that's also been helpful in helping me to let that go and say, can I look at this in a different way? Paying attention to people's good qualities and their kindness is really good for preventing the complaining energy from really getting going, and then for deflating it once it's taken off. But I've noticed that there's this one root delusion that's sort of driving all of it, and that's the belief that unpleasant feelings are unusual and avoidable. Whenever an unpleasant feeling arises in my mind, if I'm not mindful enough to catch it, aversion immediately follows. And this aversion is informed by ignorance, which says that someone is to blame and that person needs to be held accountable so this doesn't happen again. And it's completely reasonable to be angry about it, to want to destroy it because it's wrong. And of course, there's no equanimity in this. There's no recognition that this feeling will soon be gone. It's impermanent. And yet there's this very deep belief that this should not be happening in the universe. Pain should not be happening, and especially not to me. So yeah, there's this idea that pain and discomfort is bizarre, and it warrants hatred and fear. And since pain is entirely avoidable, violence and punishment are the best ways to prevent it from happening again in the future. And sadly, this usually extends to myself. I often blame myself for suffering and discomfort, thinking I should be able to get over it, I should be able to antidote it, I should be more strong or whatever. So I end up being the victim of more suffering. So having heard about the First Noble Truth, that's actually why I'm probably here right now, is I connected so deeply with that truth. But I can see in my daily behavior, this attitude of complaining is completely oblivious to the First Noble Truth. And it's really quite ridiculous to think that we're going to make it through the day without any kind of discomfort or suffering arising. Just having a body that's subject to aging, sickness, and death, and having a mind that's under the control of the afflictions and polluted karma, that itself is suffering right there. Suffering is baked into the unenlightened human condition. And every experience that we have until we reach nirvana is going to involve some degree of suffering. All we have to do is wake up in the morning. So yeah, I also looked at the sense of, I have this thing about it's not fair, and strong feelings of justice. And where does this also come from? Again, it's thinking that no one should have to suffer. If anyone suffers, it's somebody's fault. Some group is an oppressor, or they're violating some law, some standard, and they need to be punished. There should be no war, there should be no death, no violence. And it would be nice if it wasn't there, but thinking that, approaching this situation from the perspective of it shouldn't be this way is totally not helpful, only leads to more anger. And as a young person, I thought I could really try and get rid of these things, but now I know unless people stop and look at their own minds, it's really not going to happen. And another delusion that I have is that things should be easy. So again, if I feel challenged, if I feel I have to put forth a lot of effort, something is wrong, it shouldn't be this way. Even as a child, I really wondered, why is it so easy to watch TV and not to do homework? And now I'm wondering, why is it so easy to lay down and not to exercise, do my physical therapy? Like, why is that? Who came up with that? But again, thankfully, Buddha has told us that our minds are going in the direction of non-virtue due to all of the past negative actions that we've done, and the habit energy is just going in that direction. So again, it's like no use wishing it was different. This is the way it is. So I'd like to get to the point where I see suffering and challenges as being completely normal, and then actually be able to embrace them. This is what we hear bodhisattvas do, because they're exactly what we need to grow in the areas of tolerance, of endurance, of patience, and compassion. And ultimately, I would really like to see discomfort and fatigue as friends, because they remind me of the truth of my situation and samsara, and they remind me that I need to look at my mind, because only there will I actually find the solution to all of the things that appear external, but actually it's my mind that's making the problems. So in that way, I can actually start creating the causes for experiencing pleasure and renunciation, non-attachment in the future. And then that would hopefully lead to some reduction of suffering.